Corporate finance practice problem using Excel. Estimated earnings per share and dividends calculation. Get ready, it's time to take your chance with corporate finance. Here we are in Excel. If you have access to Excel and would like to follow along, note that we are in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab in essence being an answer key. We've got the information on the left-hand side. We'll use that to populate the blue areas on the right-hand side as we work through the problem. We have our calculations of the estimated earnings per share and the estimated dividends. So we're looking at past performance, looking at what has happened in the past, trying to figure out a projection into the future using that. We're going to have our data for the earnings per share in the past. So this is going to be our trend that we have up till this point. We're going to assume that the earnings per share has a constant rate of growth that will continue into the future. In other words, if we think about the earnings per share and what the growth rate will be in prior years, do we think that that growth rate will continue? What is the growth rate? We'll have a very standard growth rate here, which might be different than you'd see in practice. It might be not be exact, of course, but you could then use that to kind of project into the future, would be a common kind of starting point. And then the question is, well, what would the dividends be? The dividends, the amount of dividends that would be distributed will differ depending on what the company does, but they might have like a policy where they're basically saying the dividends as a percentage of earnings might be something that is a policy or something that we could assume that has been taking place in the past and possibly something that will be continued to go forward. We're going to say that the dividends percentage of earnings is 30% here. So now we can calculate with this information what we project the earnings per share to be in the future. And we can basically take that and project then how much we think the estimated dividends will be. So first, let's go to our earnings per share. We've got our X1, X2, X3 years here. And then if we take a look at our earnings per share calculation, we could say the change. We could look at the trend analysis. This is a very common type of trend analysis calculation that we'll do here. And that's going to be, this is equaling year 2 minus year 1, right? We could copy that down using autofill. And we could see that it increased by 1.08. So we could do that all the way down. This minus the prior year. This equals this year minus the prior year, and so on. Or I'm going to delete these two cells. We could use the autofill function and just copy this trend analysis kind of calculation down. So there we have that. And we could calculate that down. Now there it is. Now it's useful to see this analysis in terms of percentage changes, because that's going to help us to basically project into the future. So I'd like to convert this into a percent change. The way to do that is to take the change. This is the change divided by the prior period, the starting point. So this is the difference divided by the starting point. We have then a 12% increase. I'm going to make that a percent, go into the numbers group, percentifying it. Now if we do that all the way down, same kind of thing. I could take this cell divided by the starting point. We get, once again, 12%. We can do that again. This is going to be then the change divided by the prior point, the starting point, 12%. We have a constant 12% all the way down. We could also, deleting these two, use the autofill to do that as well. This percent calculation should copy down nice and neatly. So using the fill handle, calculating that down, double clicking on it to see what has happened. It's always taking the change divided by the prior period. That's what we want. And we're getting to that 12%, meaning we have a stable growth of the 12%. These growth items represent a stable 12% growth. Probably won't see something that stable in practice, but you could see a trend in the growth analysis. Once we have that, then we could say, okay, do we expect that growth analysis trend to be happening in the future? If so, then we can project what we think is going to happen the next year by just simply following this trend, of course. Looking something like this, we could say the earnings per share last year is this 1412. And then we got this 14% growth trend, which I'm going to say is 1 plus 14%, or 12%, sorry, 12%. And I'll pick up that, making it a percent numbers, percentifying it. Font, underlining it. Let's bring this to the outside. This is going to be the 1 plus the 12%, or you could sum it up. I'm going to make that a percent. Numbers group and percentify that. Font group and underline it. And then we could then take the 1416 times the 112%. That's going to give us our 15.8 14.86 that we imagine in the past, which would be that 12% increase. So another way you could think about this, note that if I take the dividend of this 14.16, obviously we could then say, well, we expect the growth to be 12%, making that a percent. So if I multiply that out, that means we're going to have about 1.7. And then, of course, I have to add that back to the beginning number, right? Back to the beginning number, which would give us, once again, our 15.86. The way we did it is we took that same 14.16 and we took 112%, 12% plus 1. So we got the 12% plus 1, making that a percent. That's basically 112%. The 14 times the 112% would give us, once again, that 15.86. Now, once we have that, then we can easily calculate what we expect our dividends to be, because it's 30% of that. So we're just going to say, all right, so now we've got this number, and we typically have a dividend of 30% of the earnings. So we'll just say, all right, 30% of that is going to be what we expect here, making that a percent, underlining it, font, and underlining it, multiplying the 1586 times that 30, we get the 4.76. You may need to add decimals to pick that up properly if the decimals aren't on your side, and that's what we would assume. So obviously with this trend analysis, this is a very steady trend that we have here, but that would be the starting point to see, do we expect that trend to happen in the future? We could then predict what the estimated earnings would be, and then we can do this comparison to figure how much we expect the dividend will be.